Everyone, it is 6:38, and we're going to call the public hearing to order. And the first order of business is short-term rental, Chapter 112, Chapter 66.
So the first one is a zoning ordinance amendment. That's Chapter 112. The council actually had an original hearing on this matter on August 21st, 2024. At the end of that hearing, they had taken a lot of people's comments under advisement. We regrouped and they provided me direction. So we made some edits to the ordinance. So this has been advertised as a completely separate hearing. Because it is a zoning ordinance, I want to go through and we have a court stenographer here. I want to demonstrate that the council has followed all of the mandatory requirements in the municipality's planning code to be able to adopt a zoning amendment. So the first is that we had to advertise tonight's hearing in the daily local news. We did that on November 5th and November 12th, and I have proof of publication of that as our first exhibit. The second thing we do is we send a full copy of the ordinance to the daily local news and to the Chester County Law Library for public inspection. I did that on October 17th, 2024. The next thing is that your planning commission has to review this. And in advance of the August 21st hearing, the planning commission had reviewed the prior version and had recommended approval of the ordinance. But because we made edits, we had to send it back to them, and they met and issued a review letter on October 30th, 2024. The planning commission actually had a tie vote, a split vote. 3 people recommended you to move forward with it, and 3 people recommended that you not move forward with it. And it wasn't so much that they were concerned about what you were doing as much as what you weren't doing. So the 3 people that voted against it wanted you to allow rental of single bedrooms within a dwelling as a short-term rental. That is something that is specifically prohibited in the current draft that you're considering tonight. And they thought that it was a good idea for the council to consider allowing individual bedrooms to be rented as short-term rentals. So my advice on that, obviously that's a policy decision for council to make. If you wanted to make that amendment, we would not be able to adopt this tonight because it would have to go back through the review process. So my suggestion is that you think about that and you maybe get more input from the planning commission on that. And if you want to do that in the future, that can be in a future amendment. So that would be one way to handle that. The fourth exhibit would be the Chester County Planning Commission. And because there have been so many drafts of this, they did issue many different review letters. But the latest one is dated October 16th, 2024. And they basically don't have any additional comments on the ordinance. So to explain what the changes were made, since the last version, we added some introductory language and what I call recital clauses that explain the purpose and try to, anytime you have a zoning regulation, the governing body has to state basically its planning purpose. So we added some recital clauses to try to explain the purposes for why council was adopting this ordinance. The next thing we did is the original draft had a use being allowed in the town center district by what's called a conditional use permit. And that's something that has to go to Borough Council in a public hearing process. We talked and we changed the ordinance to now have it be through a special exception approval, and that's issued by the zoning hearing board. So if this ordinance passes and property owners in the town center meet the criteria that are stated in the ordinance, they'll have the opportunity to file a special exception application with the zoning hearing board, and it will ultimately be the zoning hearing board who will make the decision on whether the special exception can be granted. So that was the one change, changing it from conditional use to special exception. The other change was in the separation distance requirement. So the draft that had been presented at the August hearing had a criteria that you couldn't have a short-term rental within 1,000 feet of another short-term rental. And council decided at the last hearing, after the last hearing, to eliminate that separation distance requirement, but to put an overall cap on the total number of short-term rentals that are going to be permitted. And so the ordinance draft reads that currently that there will be 20 total permitted in the town center. So we'll have to keep track of that, and your zoning and building and code department will have to keep track of the applications coming in. And what will happen is if you get to the 20 that are approved on the 21st application, the way the ordinance reads is you'll keep a waiting list basically. And if the 20 go ahead and get the rental permit that's needed and they continue to use their property for short-term rental, they'll have the right to do that. If they decide at some point they don't want to continue to do that, then the person who was the 21st applicant they would have the opportunity, the borough would notify them, and they would have the opportunity to go forward and seek that special exception approval. So that's how it's worded. Those are the changes that were made since the last version. Oh, one more. The parking requirement. So the first version had, if you had a short-term rental and it was located in the town center on a street that had residential permit parking, you had to provide one space off-street parking per bedroom. You also were allowed to provide that in an adjacent lot. And what we changed is you're also allowed to provide that in a public parking garage. So if you own something in the town center, your street is in residential permit parking under Chapter 77. I have 3 bedrooms. I have to provide 3 parking spaces either on my lot, on an adjacent lot, or I can rent them in the public parking garages. So those are your 3 options if your proposed rental is on a permit parking street. The ordinance reads that if you are in the town center and your street is not permit parking, you don't have to provide any off-street parking. The thought being is that you'll utilize the public parking that's available in the garages for that. So those are the changes that have been made since the August hearing. Happy to answer any questions that council has, but it is in a position, if you so choose, to adopt this tonight.
I just have one question for clarification. So the 20 cap, if applicant number 15 comes in and they do not meet the criteria, obviously number 21 on the list moves up, correct?
Right, so I meant that as the applicants come forward. I can talk about it. As the applicants come forward, if they get approval, then we have the list of the 20 that have approval. And it's not just the zoning approval that's important. They also have to go and get the short-term rental, assuming you adopt the next ordinance, which is an amendment to your property maintenance code. They also have to follow the steps and get the rental permit for the short-term rental. So it's a two-pronged approach. They need both of those permits to be able to operate the short-term rental.
Thank you.
All right. Is this where I ask about the fire safety or do I wait till the next one? Okay.
Is this where I ask about the bedrooms? Okay. Because I was at the planning commission and their reasoning for suggesting that maybe you allow to rent just a room, their reasoning was to keep the bigger investors from coming in and bringing the prices up, artificially making the prices go through the roof for short-term rentals. And they thought if people could use it, buy the house and use it and rent rooms, then as opposed to just a short-term rental, then this would offset their purchases and give them income, especially if you're a senior citizen and you've been in your home and now you find yourself maybe unable to pay the taxes because they've increased. If you were allowed to rent a room out, then this would help you stay in your room instead of buy into speculators and big time corporations who would swoop in and raise the prices of the home. So this is what their thinking was when they put that into the language for consideration. So I just wanted to share that with council because I know that's a concern in a lot of countries now. Even I've seen that talked about in a few countries, including Spain and some others, about Airbnbs. So something for us to think about because it's something Nick talked about a lot about, the houses just going through the roof now. More so than what they are.
I mean, I'll comment on that. I would not be in favor of doing that in the town center. I'm not sure how large the properties are. I mean, I could see if we were to ever expand it into the other areas where there are larger properties, that seems like it would be appropriate if for, retired people who live in a larger home, they'd want to rent out single bedroom, but I personally am not in favor of that for the town center district.
So I guess my only question is, if you have a house and you're renting a house, can 3 unrelated people rent the house and each have a room?
If you as the owner are living there, so if my family's living there, I can't then rent it to my family is the only people that can live there. I can't then rent to three unrelated individuals and my family living there. You can't do that. That doesn't meet the definition of family.
No, I'm talking about if you have a house, you're not living there.
Okay, so yes, you're allowed up to 4 unrelated.
So four unrelated people could live there in a 4-bedroom house, which is similar to renting a room, but the difference is,
Yeah, I think the difference is long-term. My thoughts on your comments is, it's an interesting point that the Planning Commission brought up. And I kind of take your proposal or your recommendation, like, it could be something for us to talk about. I mean, right now, we're talking about 20 units, and I bet you there are 20 people out there that are going to be clawing at our doors already to like get their rentals approved once we approve this. So I think it's something that maybe we can flesh out a little bit more, think about a little bit more, kind of have some more back and forth on it. We don't have to add it or prolong what we're doing tonight to make that decision. We always have the opportunity in the future, once we once we see how first this is going, and then we can see what modifications we think makes sense for our borough and our residents into the future.
then I would just have one question. So if someone's living there, okay. So if someone has two people living long-term in a house, that's permissible. Is that a correct statement?
Is your family living there with these other 2 people or just the 2
No,
people?
you're renting a house, you have 2 people living there
Yeah.
long-term. Because I don't know if they said long-term or short-term in their suggestions, but I guess where I'm getting at, if you had 2 people living there long-term in a house, then you chose to make it a short-term rental, would those 2 people have to leave in order
Well,
for?
yeah,
it
the
to
point
be
of the short-term rental is that those 2 people are going away for a week or a weekend. And during the time that they're not occupying the dwelling, they're renting to transient guests for a period of less than 30 days. So that's permitted. So if somebody has a rental property and they have a lease with 2 unrelated individuals, that's fine. You have a rental permit to do that. And then the owner would like also the opportunity. Now, I'm not sure how that's going to work with those 2 people that they're leasing to. That mean the people that are leasing to would have to agree that, maybe they go away for the winter, say, for example. So the owner, I suppose, I haven't really thought this through as far as a hypothetical, but I suppose the owner, again, if in the lease arrangement has that the long-term tenants aren't there for the months of January and February, say, and that the owner wants to apply, again, they're in the town center, they meet all the other criteria, they could file for a special exception to be able to utilize that rental for short-term rental purposes when the long-term tenants are not there. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if that's the question you had. Yeah, I mean, so the question is, can a property be both a long-term rental and a short-term rental? I think if the landlord wanted it and arranged it that way in their leases and got the necessary zoning approval, I believe that could happen. I don't think it's likely that's going to happen, but I think it could.
I just want to say to the mayor's point, I do agree with what the planning commission stated. And to Patrick's point, I do believe that there should be a special exception made, but that would be outside of town center. And again, to Nicole's point, that's something that we could discuss later down the road to see just how this ordinance is working. But I would be more comfortable with an owner occupied outside of town center, because that's where I think you're going to have a lot more lucrative deals with real estate than you would in town center. So I think that would make sense moving forward, maybe down the road.
Additional comments? Council? Mayor?
I just would ask us to look at this, once we enact it, if we get to that point, look at this and figure out when we want to look at this again. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comments or statements.
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. Upon the sale or transfer of an approved rental, will the new owner go to the bottom of the waiting list? Thank you.
I believe the answer to that is yes.
On the sale of the property will what? It runs with the land. So if you get a special exception, if I right now own a property in the town center, I go through the process and I have it approved and I sell it to Dana, Dana can continue with that approval. She doesn't have to start over. It runs with any zoning decision runs with the property. But if Dana comes in and says, I don't want to rent it as a short-term rental, she won't renew her license and number 21 can have an opportunity to go get approval. Does that make sense?
Wouldn't Dana, though, in your example, have to renew that license anyway?
Well, from a zoning perspective, the zoning runs with the land. The ordinance for the rental permit is an annual renewal. So
Right.
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Thank you.
every year, if you have the zoning approval, you have to get the rental permit. No different than our long-term rentals. It's an annual permit process.
Is that the same if it's like, we switched the conditional use to the accept?
Yep, any zoning approval, whether it's conditional use or special exception or variance approval for that matter, runs with the property.
Further questions or comments?
Is this for the ordinance general, just the portion that you're discussing?
This is specifically for the ordinance.
Okay. Tony Saletta, 402 West Gay. SALETTA. I've appeared several times before you folks, and I don't want to belabor any of the things I talked before. I think you've really come to something with the numerical decision on how many to have. And I would just ask that you consider allowing it outside of town center. We've seen time and time again that it hasn't been a nuisance. And, the issue of it becoming a nuisance, I don't think we can prepare for any eventuality, but short-term rentals have been here for a long time. And the ordinance is trying to regulate that. But again, you're regulating a problem that you don't have. Allowing it in a town center would do, I think, a significant benefit, because not only do you have the questions of income for people, it may be the case with the rooms, and also for whole apartments and whole houses too. And most of the people are in the neighborhood. But really what it does is creates a space for people who are visiting to not have the same experience they would above a apartment or a restaurant in town center. If you've been out there at 2:15 a.m., I mean, there's hundreds of people that come out of the bars at the same time. If you're traveling with pets, kids, you don't want to do a second floor walk up. What this does, it lends a better flavor to those visiting our community. It's families, it's people here for weddings, funerals, soccer tournaments, those kind of things. But I just ask you to consider moving outside of town center. Keep a number. A number in the borough, I think, would be answer the problem. How many do you want? Keep it that, and then allow us to apply for those permits. So I appreciate the work you guys have done as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Okay. Kristen, will you be the one to call the question in this case?
I meant to ask Sean if he goes in a specific order, so I'll just go down. Ms. Dorsey? Yes. Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Travis is not here. Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
And Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
So it's 6-0, it passes. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next ordinance.
So the next one I alluded to at the first hearing in August, we never made it to this point. So we didn't, although we had advertised it, we did not have a hearing on the proposed amendment to Chapter 66. Chapter 66 is your Housing and Property Maintenance Code. And this proposal would be to amend Section 66-2 by adding a new subparagraph S, adopting a new Article 11, which is titled Short-Term Rental License. So because this isn't zoning, we don't have quite as many procedural requirements, but we still had to advertise tonight as a public hearing. We did that in the Daily Local News on November 12th, And I also sent a copy of the ordinance to Daily Local and Law Library on October 17th. What we did here is we modeled the short-term rental requirement, permit requirement, excuse me, after your long-term rental. So today in the borough, if you lease your property, you're required annually to get a rental permit. And that's in Chapter 10 of your property maintenance code. So this new Article 11 has similar requirements in terms of filing the application, requiring an annual inspection, but then it also has very specific criteria that the code enforcement officer, before they issue the rental permit, would be inspecting to make sure that the property has these particular things. So it talks about the application process. It talks about the annual inspection. It talks about the requirement, and this again is modeled after your long-term rental. You have to designate if the property is located, I'm sorry, if the owner is not residing in the short-term rental, then they have to have a local agent, basically. And the managing agency or a local contact person which will manage it, and that company or individual must be located within 15 miles of the property. Overnight occupancy for short-term rentals is limited to no more than 2 people per bedroom. No bedrooms can contain cooking facilities. No food is allowed to be served to the guests. They may not occupy spaces outdoors like recreational vehicles, campers, or trailers. All of the requirements of the borough building code, electrical code, fire code, and plumbing code must be met, as well as there has to be a functioning smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector, and fire extinguisher. I mentioned they're not allowed to sleep outdoors or in tents. There can be no signs identifying the short-term rental. The owner must maintain a guest register and preserve the registration records for a minimum of 3 years. They must have a clearly visible and legible notice posted within the dwelling indicating the name of the owner or the managing agency, the 911 address of the property, the maximum number of occupants, the maximum number of vehicles that are allowed to be on the property, information concerning trash and recycling pickup day, and notification that the guests can be cited or fined for creating a disturbance or violating any borough code, state, or federal law. There's also a provision about not being permitted to engage in disorderly conduct. That again is taken over from your long-term rental regulations. The last one is the short-term rental may not be used as an event space, which is, you see sometimes people renting them for weddings or ceremonies and things. So this specifically prohibits that. There's a reference to a fee. So council will have to, when it adopts its fee schedule, they'll have to have determine what is an appropriate fee for a rental permit for a short-term rental. So that's something we have to keep a note of if this is adopted. And then there's enforcement and violation provisions like we do in any other code. There have been some comments, and we appreciate the citizens' comments on paying attention to this ordinance. And I believe Ms. Shimona had asked that there be edits made to the ordinance. So I did, with that suggestion, council can consider adding 2 additional requirements. The one would be that the owner of the short-term rental must develop and provide to all guests a written plan for emergency evacuation of the dwelling. And the next one is, if smoking is permitted on the property, the owner of the short-term rental must inform guests of designated locations where smoking can occur, provide safety ashtrays and bins, and instruct guests to fully and safely extinguish all smoking materials. So those were 2 suggestions that I believe Nicole would like to see added to the ordinance, which we are happy to do that if the rest of council is interested in that. So again, happy to answer any questions. Again, this is a 2-pronged approach here.
Council, any comments, questions?
I have a question on the fees, Ms. Camp. Since a short-term rental, in my mind, is a motel in the middle of a block or in a zoning district, town center, the fees that a local hotel, like the new Indigo Hotel and the Warner Hotel, could those fees for, I guess, to obtain a license, could that be used to justify whatever the costs are?
So are you talking about the hotel tax that's paid to the county? Yeah, so no, I don't know what standard, to be honest, the county applies to. I don't know what the parameter is for the hotel tax. You don't have the authority to do a hotel tax. I know we looked into that. The law on what your administrative permit fees is that it should be so that you're not making a profit off of it, you're covering your administrative expenses. So there's going to have to be an analysis by your department to determine, well, what is it costing us to administer this program in terms of your staff, your, whatever, basically whatever fees the borough is incurring, not on the zoning part of it. It's going to have to be on the Chapter 66 component part. And that it will include the inspections. It will include, administrating the paperwork that's needed, that kind of thing. So we'll have to, I think it's going to be pretty similar to your long-term rental fee, but we will have to think about that and have some analysis put into it.
So I just wanted to say one thing. Thank you again for proposing the additional language. Hopefully, I think that should be amenable to the council here. I want to thank Lisa for continuing her advocacy to call to our attention, the things that we need to do and have our eye on with regards to not just these short-term rentals, but also, we've talked previously about, relooking even at our longer-term rental leases and what can we do with regards to fire safety. And so thank you for bringing this to our attention and continuing to bring it. I know it's not every single thing that was on your list, but hopefully, you've been heard and we're looking at it and we're thinking about it. So thank you.
Any other comments? Council, any public comments or questions? If you would please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Yes, no problem. Lisa Kearns, West Biddle Street. I want to thank council for drafting overall the short-term rental ordinance. You saw that the code was lacking in an area and you took steps to correct it, and I commend you for that. And now you've also taken meaningful steps, not just to address, parking and noise and density, but also spent some focused time and attention and consideration on fire safety. And I appreciate that as well. As we've discussed, parking, noise, and density, that's all really important, but it's probably not going to kill anybody. Inadequate fire safety standards could. And I understand the council, you're much more comfortable talking about those other things because you do it all the time, but you took the extra steps and the extra time to focus on fire safety, and that's appreciated. And while you didn't adopt everything that I suggested and that some of the other government municipalities have adopted, you did for the first time really talk about fire safety and concentrate on it. And I urge you to continue to do that. As you've mentioned, there's only going to be like 20 short-term rentals, but you've got thousands of long-term rentals in this borough. And it was in a long-term rental that my friend Alexandra Steele died in a fire in this borough less than a year ago. And I say her name each time that I address council because I want to make this real. It's not hypothetical. It's not abstract. She was a real person and she lost her life. And I appreciate you taking time to really look at this in her honor. And I hope you continue to learn about fire safety and to talk about it when you're looking at your ordinances, when you're looking at new development plans and things like that. Review your existing ordinances. And I urge you to look at the lowest standard that you have on some of your properties and consider, is that enough? Can we do more? Should we do more? Work with the fire chief. What happens when you think about this? Think about what happens if the fire that killed my friend didn't happen in an isolated, detached, historic building, but happened downtown, surrounded by other homes and businesses. Could have been really bad. And I know there's not one fire safety champion on this council, so I ask that each of you continue to learn and think and take action to make this town a little safer than it is even now. Thank you, really, from the bottom of my heart. You guys made a difference and it's appreciated.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other comments or questions,
If someone's going to make a motion, just make sure that the motion includes that you want that added language added. So if you want the added language, the two sentence, the 2 paragraphs we added.
As presented with 2 additional options.
Second.
Ms. Camp, please call the
Okay.
question.
Ms. Dorsey? Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
And Mr. McCoy?
Yes,
Okay, again, passes 6-0. Thank you very much.
thank you. Okay, next we will move on to adopt the 2025 budget.
So this was presented as a preliminary budget at your last meeting. We followed the Borough Home Rule Charter in terms of we had to advertise that the preliminary budget was available for inspection. I believe changes have been made, and Barbara will now go over what those changes are. Again, if you're satisfied with those changes, you're able to adopt this evening if you want.
Thank you.
Good evening. Since the last time that this preliminary budget was approved, we added $153,784 to the 2025 budget. Of that amount, $101,349 was added to the general fund, and that's broken down by $66,349 was added to the cash reserves, and $35,000 was added to grant revenue. On the expense side, we added $40,000 for consultant fees for grant-related items. We added $9,211 under the Good Fellowship contribution for their ATV request. And we added $52,138 to the transfer to capital for public works capital expense and recreation capital expense. And then on the capital fund, we added $52,435. On the revenue side, we added $52,435 from the transfer from general fund. And then on the expense side, $52,138 for capital expense for the Public Works Department for the Gay Street closure and for recreation for the PROS plan. And then we had a miscellaneous adjustment to the recreation in lieu cash reserve of $298. If council does choose to approve this budget tonight, we are looking for authorization for the solicitor to prepare an advertisement and conduct a public hearing on December 18th to increase the sewer rates for 2025 as well. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Appreciate, we started this back in September, I think, with the
Yes.
very preliminary. So thank you
Yep.
and everyone else on staff for getting this done early and, very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments? Questions?
Question on the budget. The interest that we are accruing in the capital reserves, right? Capital reserves. Mr. Metrick said he was going to use that interest to put into the general fund.
Yes, we have budgeted $189,078 as a transfer from the capital operating fund in the general fund revenues.
Is it tied to any capital projects or just into the?
It's not tied to any specific projects. It was just a number that was used to help balance the budget and not have to increase taxes for this year.
Thank you.
Further questions, comments? Is there any public questions, comments? Okay, seeing none. Someone care to make a motion?
I'll second it.
Ms. Camp, will you call the question?
Ms. Dorsey?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
No.
Ms. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
And Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
5-2-1 with 1 absent.
Thank you. Okay, we're done with hearings. Next, we'll call the Borough Council meeting to order at 7:14, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Flynn. Thank you. Moving on to announcements, we have held an executive session this evening to discuss legal matters. B, to announce vacancies for the Borough of Westchester boards, commissions, and committees. There are a list here that you can see. The Historic Architectural Review Board has one vacancy. Human Relations has one. Civil Service Commission one. Library one. Committee to Establish Rail Service to Westchester 4. Sustainability Advisory Ad Hoc Committee 1. Recreation Commission 1. Transportation Advisory Committee 5 to 7. Just a reminder, number 8 is the newly formed Transportation Committee. So this is a new one. So please spread the word. Let people know that we are looking for folks to volunteer their time. Any comments or questions by council or public? Oh, thank you. Just a note that the deadline has been extended until December 10th to submit resumes. Thank you. Okay, next moving on to comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items that are not on the agenda. Okay, seeing none, we have no, I'm sorry, comments by the Borough Council and Mayor, starting with Ms. Vaccaro.
I wanted to remind everyone of Small Business Weekend. It's coming up. Shop local. Get ready for Christmas. It is November 29th to December 1st. There is free parking in the borough. Come out and support our local shops. Also, if you are up for it, we are starting a turkey trot on Thanksgiving. Register, wear your shoes, run, walk, whatever you want to do. Stay active, stay part of our borough, and make it a tradition.
Thank you. Mr. McGinnis.
Thank you. I just want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and in particular, the cops, the firefighters, and the EMT that'll be on call those days.
Thank you. Ms. Dorsey. Thank you. Mr. Flynn.
Greetings from the sweetest ward in the borough, the 6th ward. I want to take you back to August. And on Church Street, there was a dunk tank there that I participated in, and everyone in the borough had a great time trying to see if I could actually swim. Thank goodness it wasn't over my head. Well, Ms. Vaccaro mentioned the turkey trot. 7:30 on Thanksgiving morning. Come and see who's going to be maybe in the turkey costume, greeting everyone. Also, that morning, they're going to have a betting platform called FanDuel to see if I could actually make the 5K. So they're going to bet on how far I could either walk, run, or crawl for the 5K. It's going to be an event. The dunk tank was unique, and I think this is going to be even. I'm glad the EMTs are going to be there. So it's going to be a fun day. So come out and see who's actually going to be in that turkey outfit.
And will you be running in the turkey outfit?
You should.
If I can breathe through that little hole, maybe.
I will bet on that.
You can. Thank you.
Ms. Simone.
All right, a couple of things. First of all, November 10th, there was an event between the Westchester University sorority and fraternity groups and the Westchester Borough, supported by the mayor. where both students and residents came together to do kind of a trash cleanup day. It was not just about, picking up some trash on the sidewalk. It was really about bringing students and residents together, especially in the fourth ward where a lot of us all cohabitate. And I think it was a really successful event, got great feedback, and people had a really good time getting to know each other and doing a little good for the borough. And we want to plan another one for the spring. We want to make this a regular thing every semester. So hopefully we can get more attendance and more people coming together and doing some good for the borough. But I'm thankful that we had such a great event back on the 10th. The other thing I'm thankful for, since it is the month of thankful, I am very thankful for all of you guys, this has been a wonderful experience being one of your borough council representatives. I've been really enjoying it this year. I love the things we talk about. I love the things I'm learning about the borough. I love hearing the perspectives from the community and really kind of trying to do what we can to make this an even better place than it already is. Because, Westchester Borough is pretty awesome, already, but like, what can we do to continue to make it even better? And so I'm very, very, very grateful to be here and to be able to be a part of this with all of you. So thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Mayor, it's your turn.
Gosh, I started out with nothing. Now I feel like I have 5 different things to talk about. So listening to you all. But first, I wanted to say we have such great people in the borough, from council members. Nicole worked really hard on pulling together the students, and she had over 75 students there coming out bright and early to pick up trash in the 4th and 2nd ward, which is, it was really good to see, along with the residents. So I thank you for that. And then we have such wonderful employees because they're putting together a winter coat a drive. And so gently used winter coats. This is posted on the door. You can take a photo of it. So please, if you can, contribute a gently used coat if you have extra coats. I know you don't, Mr. Ratu, but some of the others might have extra coats. So please consider doing that because we have such great people who do want to give back and continually giving back to the community. And I had an experience. Third, I wanted to share my experience this past week. I had an opportunity to speak with a gentleman by the name of David Haddad, who does all the big transportation. Many of you may or may not know that they're filming the Netflix show Tires in Westchester, and it's been low key, but they've been around town and they're getting interviews from people. And I have to admit, I haven't seen the show yet, but I promised Mr. Haddad I would watch three episodes. So, but he asked me how I would describe Westchester to someone who's never heard of Westchester, never been here, no experience. And I thought about it and I thought I would describe it as it has the historical background and depth of a Williamsburg, but it has the cosmopolitan feel of a big city because it comes with a rich depth of history, and we live in this William Penn territory, but yet and still, he talked about the vibe of it and everyone being so friendly. And so we do have a town that we can cherish and everyone wants to be here. And I know that council members wrestle mightily about trying to do the right thing for this town, and that, as do we all. And that's one thing that unites each and every one of us up here, that we do want to do the right thing by the town because the town has been good to us. Fourth, and I'm almost finished, Patrick, because you're giving me the side eye. Fourth, December 6th is the parade. I know happy Thanksgiving. And oh, by the way, the Christmas parade, December 6th, and we are having a special float that Public Works has really been working on. So we're going to have, we hope to have council represented. I know several of you have committed. And we hope to have borough employees on the float. And so Public Works has really been working hard for this 225th, as we go out of celebrating 225th years here in Westchester. Look for that special float, December 6th holiday parade. And I forgot my fifth one. Aren't you?
Oh, well, too bad. So, in keeping the spirit of gratitude, the boards and commissions, of which there are vacancies that I mentioned earlier, don't get enough credit and recognition, but they're the people that make the borough what it is. Really, there's many, many, many people who put in many, many hours over the course of every single month, giving us advice through what they do. But if you are so inclined to refer to others and let people know that it's a great way to get involved, get to know other people, and be a bigger part of the community. So I thank all those that have given their service over the last year and many before that. So happy Thanksgiving. And with that, we will move on to reports and presentations, which we have none. And old business. The first one is to discuss approving the filing of writs of execution listing for sale, and clear sale by Portnoy for unpaid property tax, sewer, and stream protection fees. I think this has been, Barb, I'll let you go, but I think we're going straight to approval of this with a little explanation.
So as we talked about last night, this is for a total of 8 properties. One of the questions that came up was the agreement with Portnoy. We do have an agreement that was signed back in 2018 with Portnoy that gives them the authority to collect on our behalf for real estate taxes and other municipal claims. And they have the authority to collect these delinquent taxes under the Municipal Claims and Tax Liens Act. We have 3 properties that are combined stream protection, sewer, and tax. The total that is due to the borough is $23,789.79. And then we have 5 other properties that have a combined stream protection and sewer balance of $18,851.58 for a total due of $42,641.37. And then there's also $23,206.83 that would be due for attorney's fees and costs that would not come to us. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Questions? Any public comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. Somebody like to make a motion to approve filing of writs of execution and listing for sale and free and clear sale by Portnoy for unpaid property tax, sewer, and stream protection fees.
I'd like to make a motion to add it to the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. Please make a motion.
No,
Or,
is that not how we
call
do it?
question?
Or do we just?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know if that, you might as well have to just vote on it because I'm not certain if when you move it to consent, if you have to vote to move it to consent. So let's just do that. Ms. Dorsey?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
And Mr. McCoy?
Yes. Okay, item B, discussing approving the Civil Service Commission policy and procedures. This has, we do not have representative of the Civil Service Commission, but we have had ample opportunity to review all these. And I think if everyone is in agreement, if somebody like a motion to approve the Civil Service Commission policy and procedures.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Dorsey? Yes. Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro? Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
And Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
6-0, it passes.
Okay, moving on to item C, approving the November 2024 consent agenda.
And I'll second that.
Ms. Camp, please call the question.
Sure. Ms. Dorsey? Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
And Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
The vote passes 6-0. The consent agenda is approved.
Okay, moving on to item 8, other business, Borough Council photo op to announce a $750,000 grant secured for the Goose Creek sanitary sewer conveyance improvements.
So I think it was suggested we just adjourn, but there is a photo op if anyone's interested.
Okay, in that case, we will adjourn at 7:29. Thank you.